The inky void of deep space held no warmth, no comfort, only the silent, chilling promise of oblivion. On the bridge of the stellar Imperator, Captain Velter of the Xerian Empire stood as a statue carved from arrogance and cold certainty, his eyes fixed on the star-dusted panorama beyond the crystalline viewport. His command was not merely a ship. It was a floating fortress, a 3,000-meter leviathan of polished alloy and pulsating energy cores, its hull bristling with cannons capable of cracking a small moon into celestial gravel. Around him, floating in perfect, menacing formation, 11 identical dreadnoughts glinted like a jury of executioners against the velvet black. They were the mailed fist of an empire that had not known defeat for a millennium, the ultimate argument in a galaxy of whispered threats and silent submissions. Today's mission was a formality, a bureaucratic piece of theater meant to humble an upstart species clawing its way from the cosmic mud. They were to meet the humans. Like, subscribe, share, and comment below to follow this epic tale of humanity's rise in a hostile galaxy. Status report, Officer Crix. Velter's voice cut through the bridge's sterile hum, a sound as smooth and cold as titanium. His second-in-command, a being whose carapace gleamed under the console lights, tapped a data slate. Long-range scans confirm, Captain. The human vessel has entered the designated neutral zone. A single contact. Designated consequences. A ripple of muted amusement passed through the bridge crew. Consequences. What a quaint, ominous little name for a species so pathetically behind the curve. For 3 standard years, Xerian observation posts had monitored the blue marble of Earth. They'd seen primitive chemical rockets belch fire into their own atmosphere, detected the crude radio wave chatter of a divided world, and analyzed weapons that used explosive powder to propel lumps of metal. The humans were infants, violent and stubborn, but ultimately fragile. Their request for a Galactic Council membership evaluation was a punchline waiting for its delivery. 800 meters in length, Crix continued, a hint of pity in his multitonal voice. Smaller than our intrasystem shuttles. Composition appears to be simple iron-nickel alloys. Energy signature is negligible. It is unimpressive. Velter allowed himself a thin, lipless smile. The script was familiar. The Council would display overwhelming force, 12 Xerian dreadnoughts against 1 primitive tub, and the newcomers would be offered a simple, stark choice: voluntary subjugation as a protectorate or annihilation. Most chose correctly. He wondered if these humans would be smart or become another tragic footnote. Initiate the hyperspace jump, Velter ordered. Let us not keep our guests waiting. Space itself convulsed. The fabric of reality twisted, screamed in silent protest, and folded in upon itself in a blinding kaleidoscope of non-light. In a heartbeat that defied physics, the Xerian armada translated from the ordered space lanes near their outpost to the chaotic, rocky graveyard of the predetermined meeting place. Asteroid Field Theta 77. The field was a frozen storm, a million jagged monuments of stone and ice drifting in eternal, silent ballet. And there, holding position amidst the drifting monoliths, was the human ship that on the Imperator's main viewer. It was a mere silhouette, a sliver of deeper black against the starry backdrop. It lacked the aggressive, weapon-studded profile of a Xerian warship. It had no glowing shield emitters, no gargantuan engine nacelles vomiting blue plasma. Its hull was smooth, almost featureless, a dark egg against the cosmos. Begin full active scan, Velter commanded, a seed of professional curiosity taking root. I want to know what they're hiding. At her station, Science Officer Kixnall, her delicate sensory tendrils interfacing directly with the scanner suite, let out a soft chitter of confusion. Captain, the readings are anomalous. The hull material is unknown. Composite density is off the scale. It's absorbing our scan pulses, not reflecting them. The energy profile is dormant, almost inert. It's like looking at a black hole's shadow. Velter's brow furrow deepened. Stealth technology was known, but not to this degree. Not for a species that, according to all reports, still burned fossilized plant matter for energy. Weapons? He pressed. None detectable, sir. No plasma conduits, no missile bay thermal signatures, no particle projector arrays. If I didn't know better, I would classify it as a long-haul freighter or a generation ship. Kixnall's tendrils twitched nervously. But the absorption rates, they're theoretically impossible for any passive material. A freight hauler. Perhaps the humans were smarter than they looked. Send an unarmed vessel, signal peaceful intent, and negotiate from a position of perceived weakness. A cynical but survivable strategy. Velter felt a minor flicker of respect. He opened a hailing frequency, the standard first contact protocol scrolling on his screen. He was about to enunciate the Xerian Empire's formal greetings when movement on the viewer arrested him. The human ship was turning, not maneuvering with thrusters, but rotating slowly, gracefully, along its central axis like a planet turning to face its sun. As the hidden side came into view, Velter's complacency began to rot from the inside out. What had appeared smooth was intricately segmented. Hairline fractures in the obsidian shell resolved into geometric patterns, hexagonal and octagonal panels, interlocking with machined perfection. Seams so fine they were nearly invisible traced complex circuits across the hull. Sir, Kixnall's voice had lost its academic calm. Those aren't construction seams. Those are access panels. Bay doors. I'm detecting micron-level actuators along every line. The rotation completed. Now, illuminated by the distant glow of a red giant, they could see script etched into the hull near the prow. The Imperator's computer auto-translated the angular human symbols. UES consequences. A cold, hollow feeling began to pool in Velter's gut. In Xerian culture, ships were named for virtues, for celestial beauty, for philosophical concepts. Consequences was not a name. It was a statement, a warning, a verdict waiting to be delivered. Sir, the weapons officer's voice was sharp, urgent. Energy spike, localized to multiple hull sectors. Those panels, they're moving. On the viewer, the consequences began to bloom. The dark flower of humanity's intent unfolded with silent, terrifying grace. Segments of hull slid back, folded inward, and retracted, revealing not empty cargo holds, but a breathtaking, horrifying depth of armament. First came the kinetic batteries. Massive, brutish barrels of dull gray metal that extended like the talons of some primordial beast, their bores wide enough to swallow a shuttle whole. Then missile silo hatches irised open, revealing racks upon racks of sleek, predatory shapes nestled in their launch tubes. From every flat surface and structural node, smaller turrets emerged. Rapid-fire point defense cannons that swiveled with insectal precision, their targeting lasers already painting invisible, hypothetical dots across the Xerian formation. By the 7 moons, Officer Crix whispered, the oath a breath of pure dread. The transformation was relentless. Energy projectors, their focusing crystals glowing with a contained, malevolent amber light, powered up from recessed housings. Torpedo tubes, larger than anything on the Imperator, yawned open, hinting at payloads designed for planetary-scale demolition. Railgun conduits, crackling with static discharge, aligned themselves. The sleek, innocuous egg had shattered, revealing the dragon within. Weapons count, Velter barked, his voice tighter than he intended. Kixnall was trembling, her tendrils a blur over her console. Over 200 discrete systems, Captain, and the power readings, they're climbing exponentially. It was masking everything. The energy signature now, it's rivaling a small star's output. 200. Velter's mighty stellar Imperator, the pride of the fleet, mounted 50. The math was simple, brutal, and humiliating. Before he could formulate a command, his communications officer spoke up, voice strained. Incoming transmission from the human vessel, sir. Audio and visual. On screen, Velter managed, forcing his posture to remain rigid. The starfield on the viewer vanished, replaced by the face of a human. He was old, his hair a close-cropped steel gray. His skin leathered and crosshatched with scars that spoke of violence survived, not avoided. But it was the eyes that held Velter. Eyes of flint, devoid of bluster or fear, holding a calm so profound it was more terrifying than any glare. This was the gaze of a predator that had long since ceased needing to snarl. "I am Admiral Chan of the United Earth Space Command," the human said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that seemed to vibrate through the bridge's very deck plates. "I assume you are the Galactic Council's Evaluation Committee." Velter struggled to find moisture in his mouth. "I am Captain Velter of the Xerian Imperial Fleet. Your vessel is not what our intelligence suggested." A ghost of a smile touched Chen's lips, not warming his eyes in the slightest. "The Consequences is a Retribution-class heavy cruiser. She serves as our primary diplomatic vessel." Diplomatic? The word escaped Velter as a blurt of pure disbelief. "In human space, Captain," Chan said, the smile solidifying into something harder. "Diplomacy is the art of saying nice doggy while you very, very quietly find a bigger stick." He paused, letting the ancient, cynical aphorism hang in the silence. "The Consequences is the biggest stick we could find." The tactical display updated in real time, scarlet threat assessment glyphs flooding around the image of the human ship. The computer's analysis was bleak. Probability of fleet survival in an engagement hovered at 8.2%. The Consequences armor, according to the new passive scans, comprised layered composites and energy-diffusing matrices that could likely withstand a full broadside from the entire Xerian line. Its weapons, particularly those massive kinetic cannons, were calculated to penetrate Xerian shielding as if it were mist. "How many ships like this do you possess?" Velter asked, the question tasting like ash. Chen's smile didn't widen, but it acquired a new dimension of sharpness. "That information is classified, Captain. But I will tell you this. Every species we have met so far has asked that same question, usually right before they reconsider their position in our negotiations." A glacier of understanding began to creep down Velter's spine. The reports were wrong. Catastrophically, fatally wrong. This was not a young species begging for a seat at the table. This was a veteran, scarred and hardened in fires the galaxy knew nothing about, arriving to set the terms. "We were told humanity was primitive," Velter stated, grasping for the crumbling script. "We were," Chen acknowledged with a slow nod. "A few centuries ago, we were killing each other with pieces of sharpened metal and controlled explosions measured in grams. But we learn fast, Captain, and we have always possessed a singular, unwavering aptitude for the art of war." On the viewer behind Chen, Velter could see the human bridge, Spartan, functional, all matte black surfaces and glowing holographic tactical plots. The crew worked with quiet, focused intensity, not the tense anxiety of his own bridge, but the calm readiness of surgeons before a routine operation. "Your ship seems designed for a singular purpose. Annihilation?" Velter observed, the truth dawning on him with crushing weight. "Correct," Chun replied. "No pride, no shame, just fact. We build our tools to end conflicts with decisive finality. We have found through extensive trial and error that the most effective method of preventing war is to make the prospect of engaging in one so catastrophically unappealing that no sane entity would attempt it." The message was clear, elegant in its brutality. The Consequences was not here to be evaluated. It was here to evaluate them, to demonstrate that the power dynamic the Galactic Council took for granted had just undergone a seismic, irreversible shift. "Shall we begin the evaluation?" Chen asked, his tone deceptively mild. "Or would your fleet prefer to withdraw and reconsider its approach?" Velter's eyes swept across his bridge. He saw the stunned disbelief on Crix's face, the naked terror on Kixnall's, the white-knuckled grip of his weapons officer on the fire control panel. He looked at his fleet status display. 12 majestic dreadnoughts, each a symbol of imperial might that had cowed 100 worlds. Now, against that single black, blooming monstrosity, they looked like a child's flotilla of bath toys. Surrender was not an option. Retreat would be a political and personal death sentence. There was only one path forward, a path that led into the dark, grinning maw of the unknown. "No," Captain Velter said, his voice finding a shred of steel from the depths of his training. "We will proceed with the evaluation." Admiral Chin gave a single, grave nod. "Good. Then let us begin with a demonstration of defensive capabilities." Before Velter could ask what that entailed, the consequences came fully, terrifyingly alive. Every one of those hundreds of point defense turrets began to track and swivel in a blindingly fast, chaotic ballet, laser designators flicking out to paint harmless, yet unervingly precise, targeting dots on the bows, engines, and weapon hardpoints of every Xerian ship. The silent message was screamed into the void. "We could blind you, cripple you, core you, before you could even raise your shields." "Impressive," Velter forced out, the word hollow. "That is merely the opening act, Captain," Chun said. "Would you care to witness our offensive potential?" A part of Velter, the part that was still a sane being who valued continued existence, screamed no. But the officer, the evaluator, the representative of Galactic Order, knew he had to see. The galaxy needed to know what now walked among them. "Proceed," he heard himself say, on the viewer. Chun turned his head slightly. "Target asteroid Sigma 9. Kinetic cannon, single round, low yield." The consequences main battery, a quartet of gargantuan barrels that had aligned on a moon-sized rock drifting 1,000 kilometers away, hummed with a building, sub-audible vibration. Space around the muzzles warped, shimmering with heat haze. Fire. There was no spectacular beam of light, no roaring plume of exhaust. Only a subtle, almost imperceptible, recoil shudder through the human ship's frame. On the viewer, the targeted asteroid simply ceased to be. One moment it was a mountainous, pockmarked mass of stone and iron. The next, it was an expanding, silent cloud of superheated dust and vaporized rock, blotted out by a flash of transformative energy. No debris, no fragments, just atomic dissociation. The bridge of the stellar imperator was tomb-silent. To destroy such a mass, Velter's fleet would need to concentrate fire for minutes. The humans had done it with a single, invisible projectile. "A tungsten carbide slug," Chun explained casually, as if discussing the weather, "accelerated to 0.3 C. We have 12 such launchers. They are moderately effective for planetary bombardment and fleet engagement." Moderately effective. Velter's mind reeled. 0.3 C. 30% of light speed. The kinetic energy delivered was beyond catastrophic. It was apocalyptic. Shields were meaningless against such brute force physics. Armor was a polite suggestion. The foundation of Xerian military doctrine, of galactic military doctrine, crumbled to dust in that moment, as fine and insignificant as the remains of asteroid Sigma 9. "I believe," Velter said, his voice barely a whisper, "we should discuss terms." Admiral Chen's head tilted a fraction. "Terms, Captain? We are not here to discuss surrender. We are here to finalize the conditions of humanity's membership in the Galactic Council. As equals." The word hung in the air, heavier than any tungsten slug. Equals. It was not a request. It was a declaration. And as the expanding cloud of vaporized asteroids slowly dissipated on the viewer, Captain Velter knew, with a certainty that chilled his very blood, that it was also an incontrovertible fact. The evaluation was over. The galaxy had just been given its verdict. The silence that followed Admiral Chen's declaration was not merely an absence of sound. It was a physical pressure, a weight that squeezed the air from the stellar imperator's bridge. Captain Velter stared at the main viewer, at the implacable face of the human commander and the terrifying blossom of weaponry that framed him. The word equals echoed in his mind, not as a promise, but as a seismic event, the tectonic plates of galactic power grinding against one another, with humanity as the unforeseen continent rising from the deep. Equals, Velter repeated, the taste of the word foreign and metallic. He had come to deliver terms of subjugation, not to negotiate a treaty between peers. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. He forced his training to the surface, the rigid protocols of evaluation. Very well, Admiral. The Galactic Council's evaluation protocol is comprehensive. We shall proceed systematically. Chun gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Of course, we are eager to demonstrate our compatibility with galactic standards. The dryness in his tone suggested he found the notion of galactic standards quaint. Velter called up the first test on his data slate, his fingers feeling numb. The primary metric for any spacefaring civilization is defensive capability. Energy shield technology is paramount. Demonstrate your shield strength and recharge rate. For the first time, something resembling genuine amusement flickered in Chen's flinty eyes. An interesting starting point, Captain. We do not use energy shields. The statement was so utterly nonsensical that Velter wondered if the translation matrix had failed. You do not use shields? That is a foundational technology. How do you defend against directed energy weapons, plasma bolts, particle beams? Armor, Chen said, the simplicity of the answer itself a provocation. And point defense interception. Velter exchanged a glance with Science Officer Kixnall, whose sensory tendrils were twitching in confusion. Armor was primitive, a relic of pre-shield antiquity. Every advanced species had abandoned bulk physical protection centuries ago for the elegant efficiency of energy barriers. It was like announcing you crossed oceans on a log raft instead of a starship. You expect us to believe, Velter said slowly, that your vessel withstands attacks through layered metal? Not metal, Captain. Materials science. Would you care for a demonstration? Chen didn't wait for an answer. He gestured off-screen. Select a secondary hull section on our starboard flank. Have one of your dreadnoughts target it with a plasma cannon. Let's say, half power. A fresh wave of shock washed over the bridge. Half power from a Xerian primary plasma cannon could melt through a kilometer of planetary bedrock. It was an instrument of orbital bombardment, not ship-to-ship testing. Admiral, even at half yield, the thermal transfer could be catastrophic. I have no wish to damage your vessel. Chen's smile returned, thin and sharp. Your concern is noted, but unnecessary. Please, Captain, indulge us. The challenge was clear. Velter felt the eyes of his crew upon him. To refuse would be to admit fear. To comply risked an interstellar incident. But the human's calm was absolute, unnerving. He turned to his weapons officer. Target the designated sector on the consequences. Plasma cannon 3, half power. Single pulse. Aye, Captain. Target locked. Firing. On the viewer, a brilliant coruscating lance of star-hot plasma erupted from the nearest dreadnought. A blinding filament of destruction that crossed the void in an instant and struck the dark hull of the human ship. The energy did not splash against a shimmering shield. It impacted the physical armor with a furious, silent violence, spreading across the surface like liquid fire poured over black ice. For 3 agonizing seconds, the entire starboard flank of the consequences glowed a searing, magnesium white, the heat signature spiking to levels that should have vaporized Durasteel. Velter held his breath, waiting for the catastrophic rupture, the secondary explosions, the bloom of atmosphere and debris that it never came. The white glow faded, not in an explosive venting, but in a rapid, almost fluid dimming, as if the energy were being sucked inward. In 10 seconds, the hull was once again a featureless, cool black. The scanner readings scrolled on Kixnall's panel, and she let out a stunned, staticky gasp. No damage, Captain. Not even surface scoring. The thermal energy, it was absorbed. The hull temperature is already returning to baseline. The energy signature, it's being redirected. Chen's voice broke the stunned silence. Your plasma operates at approximately 15 million degrees Kelvin. Our standard ablative diffusion armor is rated for sustained exposure to 50 million. The lattice structure stores the kinetic and thermal energy in capacitator layers, then dissipates it as low-grade radiation over a wide area. Quite efficient, really. Shields have a single failure point. Overload the emitter and the entire system collapses. Our armor can take localized hits indefinitely. Velter's mind raced, trying to reconfigure his understanding of warfare. They hadn't eschewed shields out of primitivism, but because they had engineered something better. More robust, more reliable, less elegant but brutally effective. It was a philosophy written in carbon ceramic and heat sinks. Don't deflect the blow. Absorb it, digest it, and render it harmless. Your weapons then, Velter pressed, moving to the next item on the protocol, his voice lacking its earlier authority. We witnessed your kinetic cannon. Surely you possess energy-based systems as well. We do, Chen confirmed. Phased particle beams, laser clusters, plasma projectors of our own design. But for ship-to-ship combat, we prefer kinetics. Why? Energy weapons travel at light speed. They cannot be dodged. And they can be diffused by magnetic fields, refracted by certain shields, or absorbed by armor like ours, Chen countered. But a 20-ton rod of ferric tungsten moving at relativistic speeds. That is a simpler equation. Momentum, Captain. Pure, un diluted momentum. It does not interact with defenses. It transfers through them. The universe, in the end, respects a big rock moving very, very fast. Before Velter could formulate a response, Chun continued. But kinetics are merely one tool. Observe. The consequences rotated again, its multitude of weapons tracking with silent menace. It aligned on a smaller asteroid, a jagged rock perhaps 500 meters across. Swarm protocol, Chown said into his comm from dozens of newly revealed ports. Missiles streaked forth. But these were not the monolithic city killers Velter expected. As they flew, their casings split, each one birthing 5 smaller projectiles. Those in turn split again and again. In seconds, a cloud of thousands of intelligent munitions, each no larger than a human torso, descended upon the asteroid like metallic piranhas. They did not impact simultaneously. They swarmed, seeking fissures, weak points, burrowing into cracks before detonating. The asteroid didn't explode. It disintegrated, consumed from the inside out in a chain reaction of micro-explosions, until nothing remained but an expanding sphere of fine, glittering dust. Cluster munitions, Chen explained dispassionately. Each primary missile carries 50 submunitions. Each submunition carries 10 micro-warheads with shaped plasma charges. Effective against dispersed fleets, planetary invasion forces, or large, complex structures. Velter watched the glittering dust cloud, the tomb of solid rock. How many such missiles can your vessel carry? That is classified, Chen replied smoothly. But I can say that the consequences is capable of sustained combat operations for several standard weeks without resupply. Weeks. Velter's dreadnoughts carried enough munitions for 6 hours of intense fighting. The logistical implication was terrifying. Human ships weren't just powerful. They were enduring. They could outlast any known foe. The evaluation descended into a surreal parade of impossible capabilities. Velter asked about engagement range, bracing for another staggering answer. Our primary kinetic systems are effective at distances up to half a light-year, Chan stated, as casually as discussing the weather. Our missile guidance systems have, for all practical purposes, no range limit, assuming proper mid-course update drones are deployed. Kixnall actually recoiled from her console. Half a light-year? That's beyond visual range, beyond effective sensor tracking. The targeting solutions would be impossible over such distances with stellar drift target acceleration. Our targeting AIs account for stellar motion, gravitational lensing, and predictive target behavior up to 6 months in advance. Chun interrupted, his voice still calm. We fire not at where the target is, but at where it will be, accounting for every possible evasive maneuver. It is a mathematical certainty. 6 months. The humans could launch an attack that would find its mark half a year later. It was warfare conducted not in the present, but in the grim, deterministic future. A declaration of war could be delivered by ammunition fired before the first insult was even uttered. Velter felt the last vestiges of his confidence crumbling. Your technology, it operates on principles we have never theorized. Your advancement, for a species so young. We had good teachers, Chun said, and for the first time, a shadow passed behind his eyes, a darkness deep and old. When humanity first breached the light-speed barrier 2 centuries ago, we emerged into a neighborhood that was less than welcoming. We encountered 17 spacefaring species in our first 50 years of exploration. He paused, the silence pregnant with unspoken history. 16 of them viewed us as prey, as resources to be harvested or pests to be exterminated. They saw a young species, fractious and armed with what they considered toys, and they pounced. The bridge was utterly still. Velter dared not breathe. And the 17th? He finally asked. The 17th, Chun said, the shadow in his gaze solidifying, saw what happened to the other 16 and decided friendship was a wiser investment. The chill that had been crawling down Velter's spine now settled into his marrow. What happened to the 16? Some learned. After a demonstration of our resilience, they found negotiation preferable to extinction. They remain, in their own territories, under strict non-aggression treaties. Chen's voice grew colder, quieter. Others were more stubborn. They believed their initial superiority was insurmountable. They refused all offers of ceasefire, all diplomatic overtures. They escalated. He looked directly into the viewer, and Velter felt as though he were staring into the heart of a supernova, a cold, destructive furnace. For them, Captain, we invented new words. Words like total war. Words like unconditional surrender. And when those were rejected, we were forced to employ a final, absolute word, genocide. We did not enjoy it, but we will not be victimized. Our first law, our only immutable law, is survival. And we have learned that to ensure survival, you must become the most dangerous creature in the forest. Not to hunt, but to ensure you are never hunted again. The casual admission of genocide, delivered with the flat tone of a historical fact, was more horrifying than any weapon display. It spoke of a psychological landscape forged in fire and blood, a societal trauma that had birthed not pacifism, but a form of militant, hyper-competent paranoia. Humanity hadn't just fought for its life. It had systematically dismantled those who threatened it, and absorbed their lessons in violence. It was at this moment that the sensor alarms shrieked, "Captain!" Kixnall's voice was a screech of pure panic. Multiple hyperspace signatures, dozens of them, massive energy readings. Something's coming. On the tactical display, space around the asteroid field began to warp and tear. Reality itself seemed to blister and fold. Velter's heart hammered against his ribs. Had the humans called in a war fleet? Was this the prelude to an attack? Admiral Chen glanced at a readout on his own bridge. Ah, right on schedule. What is this? Velter demanded, his hand hovering over the fleet-wide alert control. The rest of our diplomatic delegation, Chun said, as if commenting on the arrival of a shuttle bus. One by one, ships bled into reality. They were not identical to the consequences. Some were long and knife-like, all missile racks and sensor spines. Others were blocky, brutalist fortresses, their hulls layered like the scales of some armored behemoth. A few were of such strange, non-Euclidean design that looking at them made Velter's eyes water. Angular, cloaked in shimmering fields that bent light around them. They kept coming. 10, 20, 40. A full battle group materializing with silent, menacing grace, effortlessly surrounding the 12 Xerian dreadnoughts. The tactical computer struggled to categorize them, finally slapping a generic human warship label on each, alongside threat assessments that glowed a consistent, pulsating crimson. "How many?" Velter whispered, his throat tight. 47, Chun replied. "This is Battle Group 7. A standard diplomatic escort." Standard diplomatic escort. The phrase was ludicrous. The combined firepower now encircling him could, by his quick, terrified estimate, glass a solar system. Kixnall was sobbing quietly, her tendrils limp on her console. "Over 3,000 primary weapon systems detected, Captain. The flagship, its energy signature, its reading like a planetary core. One ship, larger than the others, drifted forward. It was easily twice the size of Velter's Imperator, a cathedral of war named the UES Reckoning. As it approached, its hull too began to articulate, revealing weapon emplacements that dwarfed even those on the Consequences. At its core, a series of colossal ring-like structures powered up, thrumming with a deep, subspace frequency that vibrated in Velter's teeth. "The Reckoning," Chan said, noting his gaze. "A Planet Cracker-class strategic asset. Mounts our latest generation of tectonic disruption weapons." The term hung in the air, ugly and final. "Planet? Cracker?" Velter managed. "A necessary tool," Chun said, and there was no pride, only a grim finality in his tone. "We encountered a species, the Devourers, that embedded its critical infrastructure deep within planetary mantles. Orbital bombardment was inefficient. Excavation impossible. So we developed a resonance weapon that induces catastrophic fission in a planet's core. It breaks the world open like an egg. Then we can examine what's inside." The clinical description of planetary annihilation was beyond comprehension. You used this?" "On the Devourer homeworld, yes," Chun said, his eyes locking with Velter's. "They consumed all organic matter on every world they touched. They could not be reasoned with. They could not be stopped by fleets. So we stopped them by removing their world. The entire civilization gone in a day. A terrible solution, Captain, for a terrible problem. We do not wield such power lightly, but we do wield it." Velter looked from the monstrous Reckoning to the implacable Chun, to the 47 warships that now held his fleet in a gentle, inescapable vice. This was not a negotiation. It was a presentation of cosmic facts. Humanity possessed the power of gods, tempered by the grim pragmatism of survivors. "Why show us this?" Velter asked, his voice raw. "Why this display?" "Transparency," Chin said, "and context. The Galactic Council operates on a hierarchy of power. We are simply showing you where our power resides on that hierarchy. We wish to join your community, not as supplicants, but as contributors, as guardians. But to be a guardian, one must first prove one can bear the sword." He leaned slightly forward, his image dominating the viewer. "The evaluation can continue, Captain Velter. We can run through every test in your protocol: mobility, coordination, intelligence gathering. Or you can report to your superiors that humanity meets and exceeds all criteria for full membership. The choice is yours. Do you wish to see more?" Velter's eyes swept his bridge. He saw defeat in the slump of Crix's shoulders, utter terror in Kixnall's posture, and a dawning, horrified respect in the eyes of his weapons officer. He looked at his tactical display, a neat ring of red icons surrounding 12 blue ones. The math was irrefutable. The demonstration was complete. He had come to intimidate a child. He had found, instead, a hardened veteran holding a gun to the head of the universe. "No," Captain Velter said, the word a surrender not to force, but to truth. The evaluation is concluded. We have seen enough. Admiral Chin gave a slow, final nod. Then let us discuss the terms of humanity's membership. As equals. As the communication channel closed, and the human fleet began to assume a loose, protective formation, Velter stared out at the reckoning. He thought of the word xenocide, spoken so calmly. He thought of planets cracked open. He thought of 16 species who had looked at humanity and seen easy prey. He understood now. The weapons, the armor, the terrifying technology, these were not the essence of humanity's power. They were merely the manifestations of it. The true power was the will that had forged them. A will forged in a crucible of relentless existential war. A will that would do anything, build anything, become anything, to ensure that the story of humanity did not become just another forgotten footnote in a cruel galaxy's history. The galaxy had just been audited, and it had been found wanting. The void between stars is not empty. It is a silent, echoing gallery filled with the ghosts of dead civilizations, the muted screams of ancient wars, and the quiet, desperate hopes of those who huddle around dim suns. For Captain Velter, floating in the aftermath of humanity's demonstration, the void had never felt so crowded, so heavy. The tactical display before him was no longer a simple plot of ships and asteroids. It was a cartography of a new reality, one where the comforting certainties of Xerian supremacy had been atomized as thoroughly as the test asteroids. That he stood on the bridge of the stellar Imperator, a commander in name only. The true power in this sector of space now resided with the 47 human warships and the grim, scar-faced admiral who commanded them. The formal evaluation was over, but a deeper, more profound assessment was just beginning. One conducted not with scanners and weapons tests, but in the quiet theater of Velter's own mind. Prepare a full-spectrum data packet for the Council, Velter ordered, his voice hollow in the vast quiet. All sensor logs, tactical analyses, communication transcripts. Priority Omega encryption. Omega, for events that reshape history. Officer Crix moved to comply, his movements stiff, robotic. The arrogance that had been his carapace was gone, chipped away by the relentless hammer of human capability. And the recommendation, Captain? Velter did not hesitate. Unconditional support for humanity's immediate ascension to full Galactic Council membership, with all attendant rights, privileges, and a permanent seat on the Security Directorate. He heard the words leave his mouth, knowing they were the most consequential he would ever utter. They will question it, Crix whispered. The hegemon of the warrior caste, the Alarian collective. They will demand evidence beyond sensor logs. They will call it exaggeration, fear-mongering. Then they are fools, Velter said, turning to gaze once more at the viewer, where the U.S. reckoning hung like a dormant god. And it will be our tragic duty to watch them learn the truth the hard way. My report will not be questioned, Crix. It will be a warning. The only question is whether the Council will be wise enough to heed it. The journey back to Council space was a somber, silent pilgrimage. The human fleet, having delivered its message, simply vanished, not with the roaring tear of a conventional hyperspace jump, but with a quiet, localized folding of space that left no residual signature. One moment they were there, a constellation of lethal intent. The next, only the disturbed stellar dust remained. It was a final, subtle demonstration of a technology so advanced it bordered on magic. For 3 standard days, Velter sequestered himself, compiling his report. He did not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the asteroid dissolving into dust, felt the subaudible hum of the planet cracker's activation, met the flint-hard gaze of Admiral Chun. He wrote not as a military evaluator, but as a historian recording a pivot in the cosmic balance. He detailed the armor that drank plasma fire, the guns that hurled mountains at relativistic speeds, the intelligence that planned battles 6 months in advance. But most importantly, he tried to capture the essence of the humans, their calm, their pragmatism, the chilling history of survival etched in Chen's every word. Finally, He stood in the grand conclave chamber of Nexus Prime. The chamber was a masterpiece of bio-architectural engineering, grown from living crystal that resonated with the psychic impressions of 1,000 species. Light filtered through iridescent spires, illuminating the assembled delegates. The shimmering, gaseous forms of the ethereals contained in their crystal shells, the hulking, scaled bulk of the hegemon's reptilian envoys, the sleek avian Alarians in their anti-grav chairs, the collective mind node of the crystalline singers. This was the galaxy's parliament, a tapestry of power and tradition that had governed known space for millennia. All eyes were on him. Rumors had flown faster than his ship. The atmosphere was thick with skepticism, curiosity, and a palpable undercurrent of anxiety. The council speaker, an ancient crystalline entity whose voice was the sound of wind chimes made of diamond, intoned, "Captain Velter of the Xerian Imperial Fleet, you have returned from the evaluation of the species designated humanity. Present your findings." Velter activated the holographic emitter. In the center of the chamber, the UES consequences materialized, rotating slowly, its weapon ports ominously closed. A murmur rippled through the delegates. It looked unremarkable. "Honored Council," Velter began, his voice amplified to fill the vast space. "I must state with utmost gravity that all prior intelligence regarding humanity is not merely inaccurate. It is a dangerous fantasy. We have fundamentally misjudged the nature of this species." He played the first recording. The smooth hull of the consequences began its terrifying bloom, panels sliding back to reveal the arsenal within. The murmur grew into a chorus of shocked clicks, whistles, and subvocalizations. He fast-forwarded to the kinetic cannon test. The silent annihilation of the asteroid brought a dead silence. "Their technology operates on principles that defy our current understanding of physics," Velter continued, layering in sensor data. "Their defensive systems do not use shields. They use armor that absorbs and dissipates energy at a rate that suggests mastery over quantum heat sinking. Their kinetic weapons employ mass driver technology achieving 0.3c velocities. Their targeting systems possess predictive algorithms with a 6-month forward horizon." "Impossible." The voice was a guttural roar. Hegemon Gar, the immense reptilian ambassador, surged to his feet. "These are the boasts of a primitive species amplified by sensor ghosts. My warriors have faced such tricks before." Velter met the hegemon's furious gaze. "With respect, Hegemon Gar, I believed the same. Until I witnessed it." He switched the display. Now it showed the plasma cannon test, the searing lance of energy washing harmlessly over the black hull, the thermal readings spiking and plummeting. A Xerian primary plasma cannon, half-yield. No damage, not even scoring. The Alarian ambassador, Keithvar, a being of elegant, fragile beauty, floated forward, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the scrolling data. The energy dispersion patterns. They are not random. They are algorithmic. This is not armor. It is a structured energy capacitor, a battery that turns attack into fuel. Her tone was one of scientific awe laced with dread. "Precisely," Velter said. "They have not failed to develop shield technology. They have surpassed it. They view our reliance on defensive energy fields as a single point of failure, a weakness." He continued, methodically, ruthlessly. "The swarm missiles, the limitless endurance, the microjump drives that amounted to tactical teleportation. With each new revelation, the chamber grew colder, the weight of the new reality settling upon the delegates like a physical force. Then, he played the final clip, the arrival of the human fleet, 47 warships materializing from nowhere, the slow, menacing approach of the reckoning. He did not have sensor logs of the planet cracker's function, but he had Chen's description. He related verbatim. "We cracked their world open like an egg." Those were Admiral Chen's exact words. "They possess and have used strategic weapons capable of inducing planetary fission. They annihilated a species called the Devourers with them. The silence that followed was absolute. The concept of xenocide was known, but as a historical barbarity, a crime of ancient, forgotten despots. To hear it spoken of as a recent clinical policy tool by a new member species was shattering. How many species have they dealt with? Keithvar asked, her voice barely a whisper. Admiral Chun stated they encountered 17 upon achieving FTL. 16 were hostile. An unspecified number of those no longer exist. He described the process as a learning experience. Velter paused, letting the horror of that phrase sink in. Their civilization, honored delegates, was not forged in peace or trade. It was tempered in a crucible of relentless, genocidal war. They did not win through luck. They won because they learned faster, adapted more ruthlessly, and were willing to escalate to levels of destruction that their opponents could not conceptualize, much less match. Hegemongar slammed a massive fist on his console. And you recommend we simply hand them the keys to the galaxy? Admit this pack of rabid predators to our highest council. I recommend we acknowledge reality. Velter's own composure broke, his voice rising with passionate intensity. We do not have a choice. They are not asking for our protection. They are not requesting charity. They are informing us of their arrival as a pure power. My recommendation is not based on desire. It is based on survival. We have 3 options, and only one leads to a future where the Galactic Council remains relevant. He manipulated the controls. The hologram shifted to a strategic map of the galaxy. Option 1, we reject them. They form their own coalition, their own sphere of influence. Within a decade, every minor species on our periphery will flock to them for protection, seeing their power as more tangible than our treaties. Our authority evaporates. Option 2, we delay, impose conditions, attempt to subordinate them. This they will perceive as a profound insult and a threat. Admiral Chen's history suggests their response to perceived threats is definitive and final. He zoomed the map in on the Nexus Prime system. Option 3, we welcome them. Fully. Immediately. We integrate their strength into our own. Their enemies become our enemies. Their protective umbrella extends over every council world. We gain not a supplicant, but a guardian. A guardian with the power to crack worlds and the will to do so to those who threaten the peace. The ethereal representative, a shimmering vortex of light in a crystal prison, pulsed with slow thought. You speak of a guardian, but from what you describe, they are more akin to a rogue stellar phenomenon. Uncontrolled. Unpredictable. Incorrect, Velter said, his certainty absolute. They are the opposite of unpredictable. They have one driving, predictable principle: the survival and security of humanity. Their entire terrifying civilization is architecture built around that single pillar. They join the council not for conquest, but for stability. Stability guarantees safety. Admiral Chun said it himself. The best way to prevent war is to be so dangerous no one wants to fight you. By making them part of us, their immense danger becomes our deterrent. The debate raged for hours. Fears were voiced, traditions invoked, dire prophecies made. But Velter's evidence was irrefutable, and his logic, born of first-hand terror, was cold and compelling. When the vote was called, it was not unanimous. The warrior caste and a few other militant species voted against, pride choking their reason. But the majority, led by the pragmatic Alarians and the far-seeing ethereals, voted in favor. Humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with a permanent security directorate seat, effective immediately. As the chamber emptied, Ambassador Keithvar approached Velter. You have changed the galaxy today, Captain. I hope your understanding of these humans is correct. For all our sakes. It is not a matter of hope, Ambassador, Velter said, watching the hologram of the consequences finally flicker and die. It is a matter of mathematics. And the math now has a human face. 6 standard months later, the theory was tested. Velter, now serving as the Council's senior liaison to humanity, was aboard the UES Retribution, sister ship to the Consequences, on a routine patrol of the Outer Rim. The assignment was a form of political exile to some, but to Velter it was the most important duty of his life, to understand, firsthand, the Guardians he had helped unleash upon the galaxy. The Retribution's bridge was a study in efficient menace. It hummed with a lower, quieter energy than Xerian ships. The crew, a mix of humans and integrated AIs they called silent partners, worked with a focused calm. Admiral Chun, who commanded this sector, had greeted Velter with a firm handshake and those same unreadable eyes. "We appreciate your advocacy, Captain," Chun had said. "Now you will see what it is you advocated for." The lesson came sooner than expected. A priority message, fractured and jammed, burst through the subspace relays. It was the Council speaker. "Under attack. Nexus Prime. Unknown aggressors. Fleet overwhelming. Request immediate assistance." The signal dissolved into static. The bridge crew didn't panic. They didn't even seem surprised. They looked to Chen. "Tactical," Chun said, his voice unchanged. "Over 300 contacts, crystalline-based signatures, surrounding Nexus Prime. Council defense forces are scattered, neutralized, jamming across all bands. Nearest human asset? We are it, sir. All other battle groups are at least 4 days out at maximum jump. Council reinforcements? Xerian 10th Fleet, 4 days. Alarian Defense Force, 6. Chun nodded, as if confirming a mildly inconvenient schedule. He turned to Velter. "It would seem, Captain, the galaxy is testing our membership." "Admiral," Velter said, the tactical display showing the horrifying odds. 300 to 1. Perhaps a strategic withdrawal, a coordinated counterattack with the reinforcing fleets. Chun cut him off, not with anger, but with the quiet patience of a teacher. "Captain Velter, observe. This is the core of human military doctrine." He activated the ship-wide comm, "All hands, this is the Admiral. Hostile forces are assaulting Nexus Prime. Civilian casualties are likely already occurring. We are the only ship in range. The odds are unacceptable. Our duty is clear. Prepare for combat." To Velter's astonishment, a cheer erupted through the ship's corridors. Not a bloodthirsty roar, but a fierce, determined shout of acknowledgement. These men and women were not eager to die. They were utterly confident they would not. The Retribution leapt toward Nexus Prime, not with cautious probes, but at maximum battle speed. As they dropped from hyperspace at the system's edge, the scale of the attack became clear. The enemy vessels were beautiful and alien, ships of glowing crystal that moved in perfect, swarm-like synchrony, like a school of deadly fish. They had already shattered the orbital defenses and were beginning methodical strikes on the planet's surface. "Analysis?" Chun asked. "Collective Intelligence Network," the tactical AI replied, its voice genderless and cool. 17 primary command nodes identified. Destroying them will induce systemic failure in the swarm. Priority targets. Weapons free. What followed was not a battle. It was a clinical dissection. The Retribution ignored the thousands of smaller craft. It microjumped, vanishing and reappearing in flickers of distorted space, always near a command node. The kinetic cannon spoke once, twice. Each time, a crystalline command ship ceased to exist in a flash of silent light. With each node destroyed, a portion of the swarm fell into disarray. Ships colliding, firing wildly, drifting aimlessly. The enemy fleet, realizing the threat, converged. 300 ships turned their glittering weapons on the single human vessel. A storm of crystalline shard beams and plasma lances filled space, all converging on the Retribution. The impact would have vaporized a continent. "Brace," Chun said calmly. The energy struck. The viewer whited out. Alarms screamed on Velter's panel. but not the retributions. When the light faded, the ship was still there, its black hull glowing cherry red in massive patches. The internal temperature spiked for a moment, then began to fall just as rapidly. Damage report. Outer ablative layer 12% depleted. Heat sinks at 68% capacity. All systems nominal. They had absorbed the concentrated fire of an entire fleet. And they were annoyed, not crippled. Their turn, Chun said. The Retribution's entire arsenal erupted at once. It was a symphony of destruction. Kinetic rounds punched through crystalline hulls. Missile swarms blossomed, each seeking a dozen targets. Particle beams sliced formations in half. In less than 10 minutes, the heart of the enemy fleet was an expanding cloud of glittering debris. The remaining ships, their collective mind shattered, fled in disorganized panic. From the surface of Nexus Prime, a shaky communication came through. Human vessel. This is Nexus Control, we are here. Thank you. How did you? We had the advantage, Chun replied simply, not elaborating. He turned to Velter. The lesson was over in the quiet that followed. As rescue operations began and Council reinforcements finally trickled in, Velter found Chun on the observation deck, staring out at the stars being cleared of debris. You risked your ship, your entire crew, for a Council world, Velter said. It is not your people. It was not your fight. Chun looked at him, and for the first time, Velter saw something other than flint in the Admiral's eyes. He saw a deep, weary conviction. Captain Velter, he said, for most of our history we stood alone. We looked up at the stars and saw only darkness, and we knew that if anything came from that darkness, we would have to face it by ourselves. We built these, he gestured to the ship around them, because we had to. We became this, he tapped his own chest. Because we had no other choice. He turned back to the stars. But we always dreamed of something else. Not just survival, but community. Not just strength, but a purpose for that strength beyond mere survival. The Galactic Council, for all its flaws, represents that dream. A pact against the darkness. You offered us a seat at that table. That makes it our table. And that makes its defense our fight. He finally looked at Velter, his gaze clear and unwavering. You asked me once what happens when humanity meets an enemy it cannot defeat. We haven't met that enemy yet. But if we do, I promise you this. We will not be fighting for ourselves alone. We will be fighting for every light in the darkness. For every fragile, stubborn dream of peace huddled around a warm sun. That is the consequence of your vote, Captain. That is the meaning of our membership. You didn't just let the predators in. You gave the Guardians a home. As Velter's shuttle later departed the Retribution, he looked back at the scarred, mighty vessel. It was no longer just a weapon. It was a promise. A dark, formidable, unwavering promise. The age of human protection had begun. The galaxy had traded the comfortable, hierarchical peace of the strong overseeing the weak for a far more perilous and far more powerful pact. A peace kept by those who knew the true, terrible cost of war and who would pay any price to ensure others never had to learn it. The Guardians were awake, and for the first time since the evaluation began, staring into the infinite, indifferent black, Captain Velter felt not fear, but a profound, shuddering hope.